Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Julia and I make video essays about films, TV series and pop culture. Today we're gonna talk about Saltburn. I felt like this video was necessary because there is a lot of confusion about what the film is actually all about. This is a film that is strongly split into three main acts. Let's find out what they are and how these together can help us make sense of the film real meaning. In the first act, it's impossible not to draw comparisons with Call Me By Your Name. The cinematography and this story seem to align to a stunning visual summer of idleness, self-discovery, and exploration. And because Saltburn does start as a love story with long lavishing looks and visceral obsessions, after all, there really isn't much difference between the peach scene in Call Me By Your Name and the bathtub scene in Saltburn. The film makes it very clear that Oliver does start with a real infatuation for Felix when he shows us Oliver's initial manipulations to be noticed by him and become part of Felix's life. I do believe his murderous plan is set in motion later when he realizes that he won't be able to be permanently with Felix, and it is precipitated by two main occasions. The first one, when Felix first disregards him. This makes Oliver realize that Felix, despite being apparently kinder than his peers, finds him fascinating only because of what he represents, not who he is, and how helping Oliver out or making him feel appreciated and accepted makes himself in turn feel better. This is very similar to the white savior complex. And the second is when he arrives at Saltburn and engages with Felix's mother, which has the same exact fascination, slowly fading for her friend Pamela and now for him. This is a recurring theme in Saltburn, how this plethora of new people are really just toys that the rich family, being encapsulated in a context that it is in itself otherworldly, would fail to otherwise experience.
I see why Felix likes you so much. You're so,
So what?
I don't know. Real.
This is akin to going to the zoo to see how wild animals behave before going back to the comfort of our own home amongst those of your own species, which we believe are more evolved and sophisticated than apes. That's why it seems like a normal and reassuring phrase, but Felix does really mean it when he says to Oliver to just be himself and that way his family will love him. Once the fascination ends though, or someone else more interesting comes along, your time in the other world, which was always borrowed to begin with, expires. The film reminds us and Oliver of this constantly, the fact that it doesn't belong at a place where people eat dinner in black tie outfits, or that no one even knows his name at his own birthday party. Farley literally spells it out in the third act.
This place? It's not for you. You'll wonder how you could ever get it back. But you don't get it back. Because your summer's over.
Oliver does his best to prolong his expiration date, but eventually realizes that if he can be with them, he can become them. The consumers become the consumed, something that only Venetia figure out in the third act.
You'll eat us from the inside out.
You've drunk way too much.
Yeah.
Oliver does devour them from the inside. He develops an abstract as well as a literal hunger, which we see represented mostly in sex scenes. When Oliver performs oral sex on Venetia, the blood of which makes him akin to a vampire that by definition sucks his victims dry. The sex scene with Farley, which despite being short is about Oliver entering Farley, as well as the nude scene on top of Felix's grave.
Just desperate to get in.
Oliver wants to enter them, devour them, own them completely. In the last scene of the film, in which he dances through Saltburn, his house now, if you pay close attention, you will see that his dance moves mimic some of Felix's gestures when he first introduces Oliver to Saltburn. The film also shows us how he went back to get each of the name stones thrown in the funeral ritual and places them on top of a carillon of sorts, depicting family members as marionettes. He has collected them all and is now final and total owner. Although I did catch up on the Oliver twist fairly early on, and I do believe that the final Fincher-esque montage was unnecessary, the film is subtle into making you think that Oliver will be found out, especially after Felix's death. After all, the film starts with and maintains the use of a present-day sort of interview which resembles an interrogation of sorts. Even the blend room which we see behind Oliver makes you think that we're seeing him being held accountable, perhaps in a holding cell. And by having the Saltburn characters being so disagreeable, the film tricks you, at least up until a certain point, to be sympathetic of Oliver and complicit with him. Because following on the classical symbolism that the film wants to evoke, Oliver goes from being a plaything for what would we consider modern royals, the ultra-rich, to twisting the narrative into the mythical hero who inherits everything. Oliver is not really the victim, he's the monster, he's the Minotaur, yet he emerges victorious as Theseus, king of Crete. This becomes obvious via the maze allegory, maze that has as its very center a statue of the Minotaur from the ancient Greek myth. Once we realize Oliver's manipulations and how those led to murder, the switch happens in which Oliver goes from prey to predator. Just like Theseus, the hero character, goes into the labyrinth to defeat the monster, the Minotaur, Felix dies at the center of the maze next to the monstrous figures, and just like in the Greek myth, Theseus slays the Minotaur in the labyrinth, only to manipulate the royal family he offered to help to win the crown for himself. Oliver kills Felix to win Saltburn for himself. At the end, this is what the film is about. It's a psychosexual thriller about the desires of the main character. What this film is not, it's not a commentary on class or race or sexuality. It does have those elements embedded into it, because how can it not, given the context through which it operates? But I really do think that most people find the film unfulfilling or reductive in its commentary, because they do see it as a failed attempt to replicate, for example, Parasite, which is clearly not what the movie wanted to be in the first place. If anything, I found Saltburn to be very akin to American Psycho. Just like Saltburn is a film where its characters are very much driven by style over substance.
Let's see Paul Allen's card.
Look at that subtle off-white coloring. The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my God. It even has a watermark.
Because the second, more subtle twist into Oliver's character is driven by this exact dichotomy. The film starts with Oliver particularly favoring substance. We see this by the way he dresses, we see this by the way in which he takes his stay at Oxford seriously. We see this in a lot of different ways. There is a very interesting scene in the first act in which Oliver reprimands Farley for his criticism based on style over the substance of his essay.
So you're picking apart the style of my essay instead of the substance. That's kind of
Kind of what?
lazy.
It's completely valid to debate the rhetoric of an argument. It's not what you argue, but how.
Great point.
Yeah, especially if you haven't actually read the poems. Look forward to hearing your essay.
Farley and the Cuttons are overly driven by style in lieu of substance.
She came from Greece. She had a thirst for knowledge. It couldn't have been me. I've never wanted to know anything.
Oliver, I have a complete and utter horror of ugliness.
ever since I was very young. I don't know why.
And Oliver himself makes that switch and sacrifices his own substance for consumption, possession, and finally ownership. These are motives that appear constantly in the film. Venetia equates Oliver to a moth, and the moth, together with the Minotaur and other figures like the Ouroboros, also appear in the closing credits. The Ouroboros being a circular snake that literally consumes itself. After all, even if with more hardships than the Cuttons, it's not like Oliver couldn't move forward with the trajectory that he was in, studying and working, being supported by his middle-class family. Don't you think that if this was an eat the rich sort of tale, Fennell would have made Oliver to be from a real struggling condition or a real difficult background? The entrance to this other world that Felix represented made Oliver aware and made him desire what he couldn't naturally have. Seen this way, the final scene of the film represents not only the successful resolution of Oliver's plan, but it's also an actual celebration of style over substance. The plot twist that also shows us Oliver's real background also echoes the journey of Heathcliff, the Gothic anti-hero in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. He too is presented as a working class figure, only to be later revealed as the story's villain, orchestrating punishment upon an upper class family. And Heathcliff's motivations aren't about class either. They are about unrequited love. Just like Oliver's journey starts off with his obsession towards Felix. And after Katie dies, Heathcliff digs up her grave and lies with her. This is the obvious inspiration of the Saltburn scene of Oliver on Felix's grave. It really does help tremendously if you try to see Saltburn through a Gothic lens. The feeling of uneasiness which permeates the entire film, the entire atmosphere, especially at night with Venetia wandering the grounds in her nightgown as if she were a spirit, the sexual repression, the role of the butler, another key staple in Gothic literature, the font used in the opening, the choice of naming the house and making it the main element throughout the whole story. In fact, recently another show, The Fall of the House of Usher, which borrows heavily on the Gothic genre and specifically Edgar Allan Poe poetry, does the same thing by appropriating a strong importance to the old family house. Saltburn is not a neat the rich story. Oliver doesn't care about dismantling anything really. The film is heavily split into 3 acts. The first being the love story, in which Oliver stages the meet-cute with Felix and subsequently manipulates him to maintain interest towards him. The second is the plan, in the sense that the film does gives us hints to Oliver's preparations. For example, the film very early on implies that Oliver has purposely studied the dishes to impress Sir James, because we see a quick flash of pages turning in a book with pictures of the same dishes. We also see him studying the maze in the library, which the butler, living in the same otherworldly environment of the family, brushes off with condescension, believing this to be a simple, goofy mistake because Oliver is not used to living into such a big mansion and so he got lost. He doesn't even register that he could be up to something. And the third and final act is about consummation and ownership of the family and of Saltburn. Yet, although very weak at this point, the origins of Oliver's motivations are still there. There are still remains of the first act motive, because we see how he insists upon talking with Felix at the birthday party, and only after receiving additional rejections he follows him in the maze and poisons him. This, above anything else really, does prove how Oliver's entire drive as a main character is based on desire. This desire changes and evolves. It's first encapsulated by Felix, and then it's preserved in its purest form at Saltburn.